Hello and welcome to Butter Movies. A shocking death in 1923 Season 2, Episode 6, may have just answered the question about who John Dutton III's, Kevin Costner, grandfather is in Yellowstone. Taylor Sheridan revealed John Dutton's father, John Dutton II, Dabney Coleman, in Yellowstone Season 2, Episode 10, Sins of the Father. However, we still don't understand how John Dutton III and his father connect to the rest of the Dutton family tree. Yellowstone fans have a pretty extensive understanding of John's ancestors from Sheridan's Yellowstone prequels about the Dutton family, 1883 and 1923. Still, how John and his father connect to the earlier members of their family tree remains one of Yellowstone's mysteries about the Dutton family. That said, it's pretty clear from John Dutton II's ripe age in the Yellowstone flashback that John Dutton II was born around the 1920s, meaning his father is one of 1923's characters. Both Spencer, Brandon Schlaepfer, and Jack Dutton's, Darren Mann, wives were pregnant leading up to 1923 Season 2, Episode 6, but the chapter ruled one of them out as the man who would go on to be Costner's character's grandfather. Leading up to the onset of the Dutton family's war with Donald Whitfield, Timothy Dalton, and Banner Creighton, Jerome Flynn, Jack Dutton dies in 1923 Season 2, Episode 6, The Mountain Teeth of Monsters. When his uncle Jacob, Harrison Ford, positions him at the Dutton Lodge as the family await Spencer's arrival, the impulsive Jack is initially aggravated that he is tasked with guard duty rather than heading to the train station. Jacob had convinced Jack that guarding Cara, Helen Mirren, and Elizabeth Strafford, Michelle Randolph, was the most important thing, but Jack broke from the protocol, and it cost him his life. In Yellowstone Season 4, John Dutton revealed an ominous fact about his grandfather from 1923. In Phantom Pain, John Dutton III relays to Jimmy Herdstrom, Jefferson White, that his grandfather lost his leg, and the worst pain he ever felt was in his toes after his limb was gone. Since Jack's death officially adds to the list of shocking Dutton family deaths, and his character won't live past 1923, then we can say with some certainty that Spencer will be John Dutton's grandfather, since there's no one else in the family tree with the right age or circumstances. John Dutton II is elderly in the Yellowstone Season 4 flashback. While we don't know what year it was exactly, Kevin Costner plays John Dutton in the memory, so we can safely say the flashback takes place after the late 1990s since Josh Lucas plays John his earlier years. That has caused the prediction that John Dutton II was born between 1924 and 1930 and died between 1999 and 2003 via Yellowstone. Fandom.com. So, John Dutton II was about 80 years old in the flashback to his death, meaning Jack or Spencer fathering him in the 1920s is the most feasible. Little else is known about John Dutton II, other than he was presumably a fourth-generation Dutton, since John Dutton III is a fifth-generation rancher and Coleman's character is his father. That said, Spencer is a second-generation Dutton, so while it makes sense now that the war hero is the grandfather Kevin Costner mentions, since it can't be Jack, it also doesn't make sense that Spencer is John Dutton II's father since their connection skips a generation. If Spencer is John Dutton III's grandfather, and that seems evident at this point, the generational gap is an error. Still, perhaps there's another explanation. Considering Jack and Spencer are the only two Duttons who could be John Dutton II's father, it could be that Jack and Elizabeth's son would still be John Dutton II. It could be that Elizabeth Strafford, wanting to return to Boston after the family's war, eventually sends her son to live on his family's ranch, and, becoming like a father to him, Spencer raises John Dutton II, eventually becoming like a grandfather to his child, John Dutton III. Therefore, when Kevin Costner's John refers to his grandfather, he could very well be talking about Spencer, meaning the 1923 main character loses a leg. Howell leads them north of his cattle ranch, where Renault and Kent run into Pete Plenty Clouds. He left Tiana and her father to find them some water, but our villainous pair isn't aware that he knows them at all. Despite this, they both draw and fire. We'll just need to wait a week to see who survives. Following his fight with the tax collector and his hobo band, Spencer now finds himself lost in Texas. Believe it or not, his journey home is derailed once again. He's detained by Anadarko Marshal Mamie Fawcett, Jennifer Carpenter, who finds it suspicious that he's from the same area as Renault and Kent. Please, just leave this man alone. The priest initially refuses to step into a saloon even though he shot a child to death the other episode, but he enters the bar and tells Howell that Tiana Rainwater killed 5 nuns. He leaves out the part where they were torturing Tiana and feeding her maggot-infested food. She is evil, and evil doesn't need a reason, he says. McDowell, Robert Patrick, of Montana, who you may remember as Jacob's good friend. Still, McDowell seems more disturbed that he's talking to a female marshal than that Spencer Dutton is near to home. The patron saint of taciturn, road-worn men with good hearts and troubled minds smiles on Spencer Dutton in this week's 1923. After weeks of violent misadventures, Jake and Kara's nephew winds up on a train bound for home during the episode. We're not saying he's in the clear, because he's already run into trouble on the rails once this season, but he's a lot better off than when he was trying to stay up all night in a boxcar full of sketchballs, no? Elsewhere, Alex is doing better by the end of the episode, as well, but goodness gracious, the terribleness she has to go through before she gets there. Read on for the highlights of Only Though Paramount originally announced that 1923 Season 2 would return for 8 more episodes this February, there are actually only 2 more episodes left this season. Plus, the network is no longer referring to Season 2 as the second half of a 2-season arc, so either we're about to wrap everything up quickly in the finale or there's a 3rd season of 1923 heading our way. As we head into episode 5, it's hard to place my bet in either direction. So Anders asks Renault why Tiana killed the nuns. Because she is evil, and evil does not need a reason, the priest says, and it's enough to get Anders to admit that she, Pete and Run's his horse accompanied them on the cattle drive, though he doesn't know where they went after. Based on hoof prints, they discern that the trio went north, and Renault and Kent take off in that direction. Pete does find a watering hole, but it happens to be the same one where Renault and Kent are giving their horses a drink. They take off after him. As Pete flees, his overtaxed horse starts to falter, and then collapses. He rolls to his feet, grabs a gun, and then there's a gunshot. We'll have to wait to the next episode to see what happens next. When we catch up with Tiana, Run's his horse and Pete, they are indeed riding north, aka away from the posters, despite not knowing the terrain. After Pete peels off to look for water for the horses, Tiana angrily turns to her dad. What do we think we're doing? Everywhere is America. Everywhere used to be our country. Not one of us ever escaped. He points out that they're the last ones still fighting, so for starters, I surely thought that Spencer and Alex would have made it to the ranch by now. Instead, we learn that Spencer is still trekking his way through Texas while Alex is only as far as Chicago. We also don't see anything of Donald Whitfield this episode. Sheridan created entirely new villains this episode, and they're here solely to terrorize the one character who is desperate for a break. It's not looking good for the Duttons in 1923. I'll hand it to Taylor Sheridan. Even though viewers already know the family survives to modern day, he's making them endure the fight of their lives. By episode 5, Spencer Dutton may not ever make it home at this rate. Alexandra can't go a single episode without suffering a traumatic attack, and Zane just had a hole drilled into his skull. Back home, Jacob Dutton is 82 years old. Unless Kara, Helen Mirren, can reload her shotgun at breakneck speeds, the Duttons need some friends, and fast. Spencer is sleeping under a tree, hat over his face, when Mamie and her men wake him, guns drawn. She takes his gun, then he fields their questions about the animals he's encountered and whether he's seen Tiana, Pete and Runs his horse or Father Renault and the marshals. When they find out he's headed to Montana, Mamie snarks, sure are a lot of folks from Montana wandering around West Texas. She's suspicious of him, so she orders him to come with them to Amarillo, despite his insistence that he's not running from anyone or anything. All you're going to do out here is die. You're 30 miles from water. If you ain't a fugitive, she tells him, this is the luckiest thing that's ever happened to you or you. Spencer only wants to know if the men who killed his brother, John, are still free. You better stay in Texas if your plan is to come back here and start a war. McDowell warns him. As far as I know, war's already started, and you ain't stopped it. Tell my aunt I'm coming home. Can you do that? McDowell advises him to stop by the sheriff's department when he comes home, because the Montana he left is not the Montana of the present. Mamie has no choice but to let Spencer go. I think you owe me a train ticket, he says. When he balks at the train porter's request that he check his gun, Spencer looks disgusted. What happened to this country? What other rules were made when I was killing for this place? He asks as he climbs aboard. Okay, rip. On the train, Alex is delivered yet another blow. The ticket she bought doesn't include meal service. So while the mother sharing Alex's sleeper car divvies a meager dinner among her kids, Mrs. Dutton chases after the porter and asks him to help her find something to eat. After all, it's been days since she's had a morsel, and she's got a taciturn little lion hunter in the oven. The dining car's manager isn't nice to her, exactly, but he offers her regular meals in exchange for her working as a waitress. So Alex dons a uniform, busses tables, and engages in servile labor for the first time in her life. She's pouring tea for a passenger when the train lurches, and she winds up spilling all over the table and him. Of course, he's gross about demanding that she mop up his trousers, as well. The upside? She does get fed, after a long day on her feet, and she's able to keep the tips she makes. Now you know what it's like, her cabin mate says, unsympathetically, as Alex climbs into her bunk after her first day of work. The woman adds that Alex should marry if she wants to make it in America, but Alex informs her she's already wed to a rancher. Be careful with cowboys, love. Treat their horses better than their ladies. And with that, Alex has just about reached her limit. With all due respect, you don't look like someone who should be giving advice, she says wearily. But the woman responds that she's doing everything for her kids, and that Alex will understand someday, mothers can endure anything. Then, in case we didn't get it, Elsa voiceovers that a mother's love is really, really powerful. The next morning at breakfast, Alex waits on a snobby British couple named Hilary and Paul, played by New Amsterdam's Janet Montgomery and the morning show's Augustus Prue, respectively, and winds up chatting with them. She's grateful when they generously tip. Her spirit is briefly buoyed, until she sees that the only other patron in the dining car is the slimeball who made her touch his clothed junk the day before. He notes that she's not wearing stockings, and when she draws closer to pour his coffee, he slides his hand up. She instantly freezes, and this is not the point, but how cool is the sound design in this scene? We immediately know what's going on, and how she's about to fugue out, without a single word, but then comes back to herself, pours the hot liquid all over the guy and then bashes his brains in with the coffee pot. When she realizes what she's done, she runs, but is rounded up by a conductor and thrown in the train's version of the brig. He raped me with his hand. Is that not a crime on your trains? She asks the unsympathetic conductor, who tells her her fate will be in the hands of the Chicago police. New line. New line. When the train pulls into the Windy City, the British passengers who chatted with Alex and witnessed her violation interrupt Alex's arrest to say they saw what happened. He groped her privates, and she defended herself, Hilary says. The cop responds that the scumbag told him that Alex was his girlfriend. Well, officer, I think you should consider that a rapist might also be capable of lying, she says. The Brits are willing to make a statement, so the cop uncuffs Alex and she thanks her benefactors. Alex's attacker is arrested instead, and she is free to go. New line. New line. She immediately sees the Irish woman who was sharing her cabin, who's about to leave with Alex's valise and her tip money. She grabs them back and heads into the train station, where her connecting train to Fargo has been cancelled because of a snowdrift. It'll leave when the snow melts. And, as the unhelpful rail company employee tells her, that's not happening anytime soon. New line. New line. A despondent Alex crosses paths with the British couple again at the station. She informs them about the cancelled train, then she starts sobbing. The husband, Paul, invites her to come with them to Winnetka, Illinois. It seems a bit of respite from your adventures might be needed, he says, picking up her bag. You've seen what happens to men with wayward hands around me, she says flatly, and he assures her that he won't touch her. Then Paul and his wife lead her out of the station. New line. New line. Banner and two of his men take Christie's body to the train station, ruminate about her cause of death, then unceremoniously hurl her into a ravine. And just like that, a problem disappears, Clyde says, gloating about how they're getting away with something hard. After weeks of tension and treacherous journeys, Episode 5 of 1923 Season 2 shines a light on hope, hardships, and gunfire amidst a looming threat. Titled Only Gunshots to Guide Us, the episode follows Spencer Dutton's and Alexandra's simultaneous quests to return home to Montana as Father Renault and Marshal Kent continue their pursuit of Tiana Rainwater. Amina Nieves runs his horse, and Pete Plenty clouds with the stakes higher than ever. Viewers are left to wonder what the future holds for these beloved characters. New line. New line. The episode resumes the tension with Renault and Kent on the trail of Tiana and her companions, starting with a tense encounter with rancher Anders. Kent's discussion on Darwinian evolution and his demand to eliminate the wolf Tiana heightens the urgency. She may look young and innocent, but she is evil and must be erased, Kent insists. After twisting Anders' arm, Renault convinces him to divulge what he knows about the whereabouts of the fugitives, leading the marshals to discover that Tiana's group sailed north. As the storyline unfolds, Spencer Dutton, meanwhile, is getting closer to home,
but not without complications. After being found by Marshal Mamie Fawcett, who helps him navigate a series of tests, he learns from Sheriff McDowell that he is an unofficial Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, a fact that surprises Spencer. However, McDowell cautions him against returning to Montana to start a war, warning him, the war has already started. Spencer's destiny feels intertwined with the actions of his family back in Montana. Across this turbulent realm of danger, Alexandra's journey proves both challenging and dangerous. With her train ticket not including food, she is forced to work as a waitress on the train to stave off hunger. This decision exposes her to the unwanted advances of customers. A male passenger's lewd behavior escalates when he gropes her, prompting a fierce response. She retaliates with a scalding pot of coffee that lands in his lap. Detained afterward, the incident causes a stir, but helps her when witnesses, Hillary, Janet Montgomery, and Paul, testify on her behalf, exonerating